Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, the Monday, the 18th of July, 2011, it's my very great pleasure to introduce to you an old friend who grew up in Maylands about the same time I did, and his family was involved in business in Maylands, and I'm sure, John, I welcome you.
Thank you, Terry.
And I'm sure we'll all enjoy your talk about growing up and the things your family were involved in Maylands. So, John, I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Well, thank you, folks, and good evening. I'm pleased to be here, and I hope some of the information I can give to you is new or expand on whatever you've been looking at in the past. So, you know my name. I grew up in Maylands, first 22 years of my life in Mount Prospect Crescent, which was high on the hill overlooking the aerodrome where Frank Colquhoun worked. Look, we had a view from Perth skyline through to the beautiful East Perth Power Station, around to the river, and then further around to the aerodrome. So it was a pretty good place for 3 boys to grow up, and a nice environment there. The family was, myself as the eldest, 2 brothers, Gordon and Murray, both fabulous yachtsmen. My father, Robert John Collins, an engineer. My mother, Olive Marie Collins, who was a seamstress in those days as a dressmaker. And then the grandparents, that's on my father's side. Oswald Victor Collins, who was a blacksmith in Guildford Road, that's right. And his wife, I think it was home duties, Alice Maud Collins. So there's the family there. This Oswald Victor Collins, this blacksmith in Maylands, was actually apprenticed as a watchmaker in Birmingham, England, came out here with his parents and ended up as a blacksmith. So there's some association there, but I've lost the link. Okay. My parents lived in Maylands, or my father lived in Maylands all his life until 1960. My mother was an East Perth girl, came from the marriage into Maylands in 1934 and didn't leave until 1960. My grandparents, as far as I remember, were Maylands people after their marriage all their lives. They lived in 7th Avenue, Maylands, previously having lived in Rye Parade. That's the other side of the line, in Maylands, okay. Well, Maylands as I remember it, I don't know whether it was idyllic or not. I can remember it being normal. It was no different than anywhere else as far as we were concerned. It was certainly well developed along the railway line. It seemed to expand from there. The railway line was there, people were close to that, used it for transport, used it for conveyance of goods and that sort of thing. So it looks like the railway line was very important to the well-being of the Maylands people. Much of it, going to the east, was bush and swamps, would you believe, down at the bottom there. It was quite a rural sort of outlook. The aerodrome was a big part of our lives. We hunted in packs, all the boys together, no girls of course. That was very much part of our life. The brickworks you probably all know about. The clay pans there were all part of our recreational life. Now the river was totally important for us. We swam at Caledonian Avenue and also at East Street. Unfortunately for us, East Street introduced us to the yachting scene. and more of that later. But it was a good life in Maylands. It was free. And the thing that I remember most all about that is the fact that my mother, who had gold medals for worrying, would say goodbye to us kids in the morning, and we'd be back for lunch, and she never worried. Or left after lunch, went swimming in these 2 or 3 places, and never was concerned. It was a very good thing in those days. That was something I thought was quite exquisite when I thought about it. Primary and secondary schools were very good, quite strict. Maylands Primary School is still there and operating, I believe, as is the secondary school. No, gone.
They've shifted actually. The school
Has become what?
Building's still there.
Buildings are still there,
Is
right?
there, the school is there.
Yeah.
Down in Caledonia.
I can remember 75th anniversary there where they buried another cylinder, one of those time cylinders. But that's as far as I've got there. Around our area there are 3 main churches. The one next to my grandparents was the Presbyterian, which we attended. The one on the top of the hill, which was very important to the Roman Catholics at the time, was on the top of the hill. And there was a Church of Christ down in 8th Avenue. I don't know when that came there, but they were the 3 churches now in the vicinity. Steam trains were the way for locomotion in those days. We could hear them from our residence in the right atmospheric conditions. It was a time of close-knit families. You didn't hear or see the strife that appears to be around today. It was more stable. And I must mention that in our area we welcomed some of the DPs, displaced persons, that came out in 1946 and 47, Italians particularly, that made up quite a good section of our community in Maylands. Few cars on the road, but most families seem to have one car. And then of course the sailing. Terry's probably told you all about the sailing, but I think that was the thing that saved a lot of us children from a wayward life. I think that's organised sport was exceptionally good. My second brother started sailing down at Maylands when he was 9 years old. I was 11 and the younger brother was about 6 or 7, and that was very much a part of our life, a good part of our life. Families were involved, competition was there, Terry Gord always at the top. My brother's trying to beat him, but it was a good life and many happy family days were experienced at the Maylands Yacht Club. Have a lot of time for that organisation. Now Terry asked me particularly if I could nominate from memory some of the businesses that were operative in Maylands when I was working with my father in an engineering business near the corner of Caledonian Avenue and Watley Crescent in Maylands. So I'll just go through that list and tell you what I know. Starting first of all with this blacksmith grandfather of mine, he owned an L-shaped block that came out of 7th Avenue where he lived and then turned at right angles down towards Guildford Road where he had his blacksmith shop. It eventually became McAuliffe and Stoltz panel beaters, and he had a business there for as long as I can remember, from a little tacker up until I was about 15 when he retired. That's the earliest memory. Now 8th Avenue, I can remember the Lyric Theatre with Herbie Robinson. Once again, as boys, we were allowed to walk to that of an evening with our friends, the Logans and Capehorns, established families in Maylands. I can remember at 8th Avenue Farnham's Grocery and the old-fashioned boxes of biscuits and the smell of the place, which was quite extraordinary. And I think there was a stock feed company next to them. Can anybody help me there?
Watts had...
Yeah, they're next door to the Watts family that were in the police force, quite strongly in the police force. I can remember Sergeant's Pharmacy on the corner of Watley Crescent, which I know my parents went to. There may have been somebody there before that. And then my father banked with the ES&A Bank in Guildford Road. So that was on the corner of 8th Avenue in Guildford Road. So that's all I can remember of the business there. Then in Watley Crescent, I can remember Bride's, Orr McBride's Bakery, Southern Cross Machinery, Len Pavey's parents had a shop in Watley Crescent. Len Pavey was a state cricketer, a professor of human movement at the university, and he came up through the Maylands State School. As did David Trelaw, who became Dean of the Faculty of Economics at the University of WA. So those two boys, nothing held them back. Along Watley Crescent also, Terry just reminded me tonight, was the Institute of the Blind school. Now in Caledonian Avenue there was my father's business, R.J. Collins and Company, H.V. Mackay Massey Harris, which eventually morphed into Massey Ferguson, the big English-American firm. And next door to my father's business, right in a residential area, was a scrap metal dealer, F&R Shepherd. Yes, and how these people living on the right-hand side of my father's workshop and the left-hand side of F&R Shepherd ever managed to get a decent day's rest or sleep, I don't know. It was a stream of oxy welders, grinders, lathes, milling machines. Must have been terrible in those days. Okay. Now in Railway Parade we had R.E. Arnold and Company, sheet metal workers, also the manufacturers under licence of the Wonder Heater oil heater. We had Sterling Brass Foundry around in Sussex Street, just off Railway Parade. We had a guy around the corner of Crawford Avenue, I think, called Archie Ruddock, with a foundry, a ferrous foundry. And we had the Maylands flour mill that actually ground the flour down, run by the Quigley family, good friends of my father's. Okay, now other businesses I can remember around, mainly because my father was involved with either maintenance or manufacture, was the Maylands Hotel, run by a chappie called Maury Hoffman. The Neptune Garage on the corner of Caledonian Avenue and Guildford Road, run when I knew it by the Powell family. And the Maylands Goods Station. Now the Maylands Goods Station had spur lines into Massey Ferguson, Southern Cross Machinery, and for general loading capabilities. And one of my jobs when I was working for Dad and I was very young was to load these whaling head castings that were cast by Terry's parents, and machined in my father's workshop. I had to load those by hand into the trucks that were taken down to the Shane Beach Whaling Company. So I can remember that quite well. Okay, now all I can finish up with by saying is that my father was lucky to have had Southern Cross Machinery as a client. When he was called up to go to the war, like all under 35-year-olds were in 1932, 1939, he and his brother were taken into the Lowton Park, now the East Perth Football Club, it was the East Perth Football Club oval, and they were lined up there, and my father was asked, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm an engineer. And he said, who do you work for? And Dad replied to the officer that I worked, amongst other clients, Southern Cross Machinery, which was water conservation and therefore a manpower job, which you probably all recognise what that is. My uncle was taken off to war and didn't come back the same man. He was a piano tuner and put into the infantry, so you can imagine how he suffered. Dad's work was very much subcontract work. As I've said, Southern Cross Machinery, H.V. Mackay Massey Harris in the early stages with the different types of equipment needed to be made here. Most of this stuff was made in Sunshine in Victoria. WA tree felling. You may remember in the early days they had these tree fellers, which was a machine back here out and drove a disc, a cutting disc right out there. He was very much into that. And then fortunately mining started up in the 1960s, and we were subcontracting to a company called Warman Equipment, very heavily involved in the mining industry. So that business ran from 1932 until 1966, when it was taken over by another firm of engineers called BHB Engineers from Bayswater. Dad retired at that stage, and the three brothers who worked in the firm together all went our separate ways. So the engineering and Maylands, I think, have established the Collins family, like many others, as a stable, law-abiding, unfortunately we never went to church, citizens, and I really am pleased to have grown up in this environment. So there we have it. That's the story of Maylands as I remember. And if you've got any questions, I'll try to answer, or if you've got any corrections, let me know, because I can't remember exactly. Frank?
Yes, John. You mentioned the goods yard where you took this machinery to.
Yes.
Now, whereabouts was that in regard to Watley Crescent and or wherever?
Okay, you accessed it off Watley Crescent,
Right.
near the crossing that,
Right.
that took you across to R.E. Arlen Company
I see.
from Caledonian Avenue.
Yeah.
And the yards were actually open. There was no fencing there. The yards were open.
I see. And that's where the spur lines originated from?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure which were first. It's a possibility the first spur line was into H.V. Mackay Massey Harris, because as I remember it, and you might be able to help me here, Metham Ferguson made, I'm told, the pipes for the Kalgoorlie pipeline, and many of them were left over at the bottom of the yard that fronted Guildford Road.
Yeah.
Right, and they needed the spur line for that.
Yeah.
The spur line was also necessary for Southern Cross Windmill Company, as it was known in those days, because they were bringing in heavy knockdown equipment.
Yeah.
But the goods shed was quite an important part.
It was quite a busy, large building there.
Yes, it was.
I don't know how many actual workers were in that shed. It was a big, busy little area there.
Yeah, I'm not so sure how many there were, Terry. I can remember a grumpy old man there. He must have been 40. Who gave us tripe every time we wanted to get the wagons in, because it wasn't convenient. It was a government worker, of course, and in those days they had no incentive to do much, and he didn't do much.
So it was station side of Caledonian Avenue.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
Was there any how far between that and the station? Like there was a gap there, or
Oh, yeah.
was it part of the station?
No, it was part of the station, but it would have been a 200 yard in those days gap.
I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Quite close to the corner, but it must have
that's right. There was another business down there with a pretty girl working in it. I think it was Anderson Hardware. That's it, Anderson Building. That's the one, I'd forgotten that.
And that was the other side of the line, though, wasn't
It was.
Yeah.
But we were all interested in girls on the other side of the line. So it was a good life. And I hope I've given you enough so you can take note of it.
The Massey Harris, when they were there, our agent in America there ended up getting about six, I think it was 10 or might have been 12 machines in one haul on the whole train load.
Right.
I don't know whether they all came out of there or whether they went off a wharf or something at Fremantle.
That I can't tell you, but I know there was a lot of assembly there. They had a major
Did they have a
assembly.
big storage area?
Absolutely, very large, very large. It was a,
They could have come.
yeah, it was large enough for them to have their own machine shop, welding and maintenance and that sort of thing, but they couldn't do all the type of work, so it was farmed out to little companies around us.
I went to the front of the building a couple of times to get machinery parts. You come all the way down and pick it up.
What was the name of your company up at Meriden?
Oh, Mel Brown was one of them. And,
Massey Ferguson dealer?
yeah, and the other one was, went to school with one of the boys. I can't remember it now.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, God, sorry, can't remember it now.
Okay. All right.
It was quite a big area that still is now called Falco Park. It's all residential, but they did trials with the tractors and the machines.
That's right.
They had an enormous area
Yes.
there where they were running around doing testing machinery and.
Did you get involved with any casting work for them?
I can't remember.
No, I can't remember because we would have probably machined it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, that's all I know.
John, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, I hope to see you.
Terrific talk,
Good
John,
on
and
you.
I
Okay.
appreciate very much. And just as a little gesture of our appreciation, I'd like to take it home. It's not much, John, but anyway, we
I
can
can
drink
tell
it
you
while
what,
you think about
I'm
it.
going to look after it.